The name of this show is Living Wisdom, and I'm Patty Paul. Once again, I have my friend Steve Parrish here as a guest. I think this is about the 8th show that we've taped together over the last few years. And Steve is going to be channeling our wonderful, unconditionally loving friend, Elanor. Steve and I want to give most of this airtime to Elanor today, so I'm inviting him to begin his channeling process. I'm going to read just a little blurb to talk about who Steve is, and then after that I'm going to ask that the credits roll. By the time all of that is finished, why Elanor should be with us. Steve Parrish has been channeling Elanor since 1994. Steve provides private consultations with Elanor, in person or on the phone. And Steve is also a gifted rebirthing facilitator. Well, welcome, Elanor.
Well,
nice to have you back.
Joy and a pleasure as always.
We're going to also explore another very broad subject that I thought everyone is interested in, at least all of us humans. Understanding personal relationships. And relationships with family and, personal relationships with money and with relationships that are perhaps called romantic or... Anyway, you get the idea. So I'm just going to give you the floor once again and
All right.
invite you to speak.
We'll rattle on for a while and feel free to jump in and ask questions if anything sparks your desire to do that. So
that'll work.
Relationship. The first place to start is real part of relationship. That relationship is about the process of becoming more real, first and foremost with yourself. And from that perspective, all those different varieties of relationship that you want to look at there all come back to you. And it all starts with your relationship with you. Out of that, out of your conscious intimacy with yourself, that's where you lay the foundation. That's where you lay the groundwork, if you will, to having a relationship with anyone or anything else in your physical world, or beyond it for that matter. And that's why spiritual work, spiritual growth, human potential, whatever you want to call it, therapy, is all about learning conscious ways of learning how to interact with yourself. How to bring to consciousness, bring to your conscious awareness what's going on inside of you, so that you can share that with somebody else. So that if we're telling you what's going on inside of us, we're being emotionally honest about it, because we know what's going on inside of us. And when you come to the table and you share with us what's going on inside of you, then we can experience the process of us becoming more real, you becoming more real, and the sharedness of that, which is the relationship part, if you will. The real relationship. The exploration of your own realness and the sharing of that. And there's beauty and wonder in the sharing of that. Or there can be, perhaps we should say. Now, that all sounds really good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But then there's that, what you seem, the reality of going through life and how often you seem to butt heads. One of the biggest problems that comes into it, and it's understandable given the nature of your beingness and literally the way you are born. When you are born in the physical world, and there you are, this wonderful, beautiful little baby, and everybody's around just loving the heck out of you. And they love you exactly the way you are. They have no demands or expectations on you that day that you're born. Well, ideally, we should say. And most of the time it's that way. Occasionally people already have nonsense things, agendas attached to, okay, you're a beautiful child and I want you to save my life. You're a beautiful child and your job is to save my marriage. You're a beautiful child and your job is to be my husband because he's not here. Your job is to be my best friend because she betrayed me. And as a child, you're a sponge. You just suck it all up. And there is real, genuine love. That's virtually automatic in that sense, as you're born as a child. The mother love in that sense, whether it's your actual physical birth mother or there's a mothering figure for almost everyone in that sense, who there's a tremendous bonding. But I'm not, and that way, a child for the first year and a half of its life doesn't really even consciously understand that it's different than its mother. It truly thinks you're one and the same person. And then it starts to understand, it starts its individual process of differentiation. I want to, referring back to the last show that we taped, of separating off from that mother love. To individuate, to understand, I am my own person. I have my own boundaries. I have my own wants and needs and desires. And I need to learn how to appreciate them. I need to learn how to identify what they are. I need to learn how to discover the richness and the fullness and the wonder of what it means to be a human being. And then I can go and interact with other human beings who are all doing the same thing. And when that process is clean, if you will, when that process is focused, when you learn the tools, the kind of tools that you often talk about on your program here, when you learn the tools for understanding that process, that when you're a child, you don't have the ability to be truly responsible. When you're an adolescent, you're just beginning to have the ability to be responsible and you don't exercise it very often. When you're a young adult, you have the ability, but you usually don't exercise it very often. And when you reach in that sense, your mid-30s, and now this is just a generalization, many people do this at different times, that's when you start bringing into alignment real and true and honest self-exploration with the intent of going to true responsibility. But the rub in that sense, what often gets in people's way, is that out of those experiences in childhood, out of not either literally not getting the love that you needed, certainly out of not getting the love that you wanted, out of looking around in perhaps your immediate vicinity and your variety and seeing so much dysfunction, frequently in your own family, or at least in the neighbors, if not yours, there's a tendency, and a fairly natural tendency, to bring into place two things that tend to happen. One, I have a secret desire for that original mother love. I just want to be taken care of. I want you, even if I just met you last night, I want you to be the one who's going to love me no matter what I do, who's going to love me even if I'm totally irresponsible, who's going to love me, period. And I don't want to have anything to do with that. I just want you to love me. And with that fantasized version, if you will, of a demand for what's often called unconditional love, although if you look at it, it's extremely conditional and has very little to do with love at all. There's also the tendency to bring in a demand for perfection. Meaning, the way I get that fantasized version of here's the person who's just going to love me completely and totally is I be perfect. Or I remake you to make you perfect and then you can fulfill my fantasy. And those two things, particularly around romantic relationship.
I'm nodding my head,
Yes.
Elanor.
Around romantic relationship especially is where you'll see it played out, though it plays out in the other areas as well. Those two things, especially if you have both of them going, are absolutely, positively smack dab in your way of ever being real. Because they're both counter to being real. And they get in the way of real relationship. And we know there's lots of consensus stuff out there, and a lot of people believe in this idea of soulmate. But if you look real closely at the idea of soulmate, it is absolutely laced with both of these false principles. And it gets in the way of realness. And so rather than saying my experience, my job, if you will, is to be as real as I can with me first. To tell myself the truth about what's going on, to take genuine responsibility for my emotions, no matter what they happen to be, to not bring in a hierarchy that says, oh, I only want to feel these good, loving things, and I don't want to feel those yucky, bad things. Because what happens, oops,
I got it.
what happens when you do that is you shove all that nasty, ugly stuff down there and you pretend it's not there, and it just comes right back around and smacks you in the face. Usually in relationship. Because that's where you put it in that sense. That's where the key, the focus, if you will, of why you're shoving it out of the way in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yes,
That's there? Right.
it does to me. Yeah.
And so, to really focus on real relationship starts with a willingness to examine what's true for you. Where are you standing? What foundation are you standing on when you start to seek, in that sense, a relationship? When you want to have that particularly romantic, one-on-one, very intimate relationship, before you go that direction, you need to look at your starting point. What's true for me? How intimate am I with me? How genuinely am I in touch with my emotions? Because you see, if I can't be emotionally honest with myself, how can I possibly be emotionally honest with you? It's truly not possible. And if I'm carrying around a load of agendas about how you're going to fix me or save me or be my mother, then we're not going to have much of a real relationship. We'll have relationship, but it won't be real. It'll be something else.
The scary thing for many of us in that situation is to reveal to another person our true emotions.
Yeah. And
because
why?
It's like,
why is that so darn scary?
I don't know, but it is. It's a very vulnerable thing to do, and I guess all of our fears then start coming up.
Yes.
Rejection and
yes, exactly. Wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up, because see how wonderfully this ties in. So here you're coming along and you want a relationship, and you're trying your best to be genuine with this person. And then the fear monster creeps in and starts whispering in your ear, you're going to be rejected, he's not going to like you, this isn't going to work, you better do something else.
Yeah.
And rather than responding, being real, bringing responsibility to that fear voice itself, you listen to what it says, you assume it's telling you the truth, and then you start making choices and decisions that are based on your fear rather than on the real relationship. And that relationship is doomed from the day that starts happening. Because you're no longer having an relationship with this real person and your real self. You're now having an relationship with your negative ego, with your fear voices, with the parts of you that basically want you to be alone and miserable and unhappy, because that's what you deserve.
Right. Let me ask, because I and many of us know how to get in touch with that part of ourselves that is that fear part, and perhaps dialogue and meditation, whatever. But for some of the viewers who may not be familiar with some techniques, would you suggest something?
The best, well, first to understand that there's two things happening there. There's a difference between the emotion of fear and a fear story. Fear, the real honest to God, right in your gut, emotion of fear. If you're standing on the street corner and the bus is coming over the curb, that's fear. And your body's going to respond, and you hope fast enough before you get run over. 99% of everything else that you call fear is fear story.
Okay.
Meaning you make it up in your head. It's not a true emotional experience. It's an imposed idea on top of your true emotions. See the connection there?
Yeah.
The more real you're able to be with yourself and stay attuned to what are my real emotions, the less able the fear story is to get on top, if you will. And so what we suggest to people is you literally write out the fear story. You sit down with a pen and a piece of paper. And I say, so you're in the relationship and the fear stories are coming up. So you write down, I'm afraid that he doesn't like me, I'm afraid he's going to go away, I'm afraid he'll tell. What's the story? What's going to happen? He's going to see me, how real I, he's going to see the real me. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be acceptable. He's going to leave me. I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to crash my whole reality. I'm going to become a bag lady. And then I'm going to die. Now, we got news for you. Every single fear story that ever was invented ends in that same place. If you follow it all the way to its end, it always ends as, and then I lose everything, and some variations are then I go crazy, and then I die, and some you just die. And notice what you did. You laughed. Why did you laugh? Because you know you're not going to do that. You really do, if you tell the truth.
That's true.
You're not going to create that reality. That is not true. And if you write your story out and follow it all the way down to here where you start laughing, you can go, you know, that's not true. And if that part isn't true, you can backtrack. Well, let me look at this part. Well, maybe that's not true either. Maybe if I show him my real self, he isn't going to run screaming. And maybe this part isn't true. And gosh, that part's not true either. And it's like you take your power back from the story itself. And part of why it's so insidious is if you leave it in your head, and it's just a little whisper. Psst, 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 psst. You better be afraid now. You better not do that. You better not say that. You better start hiding yourself. You better not tell him that piece. Oh, you don't want him to know this thing about you, and you don't want him to know that thing about you, and you certainly don't want him to know that thing. It's just layer after layer, and you stop being real. You stop being intimate. You stop showing up. And we got news for you. Showing up is where all the fun comes in. What's the point of having a relationship if you're not in it? What's the point of being in life if you're not in it? Life without emotion. What's the point? You're just a machine if you don't have access to your emotions. That's where the goodies are in that sense. On the bigger scale, on the spiritual scale. Emotion's the only thing you take out of physical reality with you. It's the only thing that crosses the barrier with you. Think about that. It's quite a whisper when you think about it.
It is.
And again, you have been taught, you have been trained, you have been told most of your life, again referring somewhat back to that last program, that chauvinism comes in and it's convinced you that emotions are scary and dangerous and they only get in your way, or they're weak and they're stupid, or they're woman stuff, or whatever version they put on it. But you're constantly being told and taught, stay away from them, stay away from them, stay away from them. Well, there's a very specific reason for that. Because emotions are the most empowering of all of your raw materials.
Let me write that down again.
And chauvinism, the chauvinist in you knows that. And it doesn't want you being empowered. It doesn't want you giving yourself the permission to be the author of your own reality. It wants you fighting on the battlefield. And it doesn't care if you win or lose as long as you're fighting. Now, how does that apply to relationship? It doesn't want you being real. It wants you fighting. And don't misunderstand, we're not saying that real relationships, that you don't fight sometimes. But you fight cleanly. You fight honestly. You fight genuinely. And you fight with your heart, not with your big clubs.
And in a way, what perhaps you are indicating too is that we are fighting against the relationship.
Yes. Yes, most fights in a relationship are when one or both parties have gone to being right with a capital R. My way is right, your way is wrong. And you're stupid. And you should be a bag lady. You have your own variations on the theme in that sense. But if you look at the core of almost every fight that happens in relationship is an unwillingness to stand and be real. An unwillingness to tell the truth and keep telling it until you can find alignment. Having a relationship doesn't mean you have to agree with each other all the time. As a matter of fact, when you get right down to it, and again we know, you've heard Lazarus say this, if you're in a relationship with someone and there's nothing you don't like about them, then you don't know that person.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to go deeper into intimacy. It's not about a perfect, rosy, everything's wonderful and we're totally in alignment. That's relationship. There's nothing real in that. It would be like eating only donuts every single day. Now, donuts can be wonderful. We're not maligning donuts. But if it really was the only thing you ate all day, every day,
Yeah, you get sick of it and be bored.
You'd get very sick of it very quickly.
Never want to have another donut after a
Yet,
while.
look how many people based their relationships on that donut concept. Relationship is the donut.
Yeah.
That's what I got to get to. It's the Krispy Kreme of reality.
Uh-huh.
And relationship is wonderful. There's a kernel of truth there. It's one of the most wonderful things that you have in all your range of possibilities here. It's so exciting and wondrous. But again, that's real relationship.
Getting back to the impact that caregivers, parents, other close people have on a child, like who's a sponge. The piece of this relationship process, so to speak, where the child, the adolescent and young adult, etc., have been quote-unquote rejected, betrayed, abandoned,
Yes.
wounded. Let's get some clarity on that
All right.
too.
That's where the responsibility part comes in. As a child, you cannot take the real responsibility for what you're creating. When you reach adulthood, you have to take the real responsibility for what you created.
Aha.
And that's where so many people get caught in that
Yes.
sense, because they get hooked into blame, and they get hooked into the hurt and the anger. And it's being able to see a big enough picture that you can go to your childhood and say, I understand as an adult with real responsibility that I create all of my reality. I did not create that consciously. I did not create that hurt consciously. I didn't go out and say, yeah, I think I'll really pick a pair of parents who are going to hurt the heck out of me. That wasn't my plan. That wasn't my design. But I did allow it somewhere in this process. Something went astray, and it does. And as an adult, in order to allow that child to heal, truly heal, and to allow me to be free and to truly escape from that past, meaning to honestly to forgive it and walk away and leave it behind, I have to hold a platter, if you will, a picture that's big enough to say, I am responsible. I don't even necessarily understand how or why, but I am responsible because that gives me the ability to say, even if I don't understand how and why I created this reality, I can still forgive myself for having chosen it. And I can be conscious enough to know that I don't ever have to choose it again. And out of that forgiveness, I can let that inner child in me leave the past and come into the present where they belong, despite popular belief. That aspect of you that is the child is alive and well in you right now today. And where so many people go astray in working with their child is they keep projecting their own past onto their child over and over and over again. So the image and identity that you hold of your child is, well, I know what they felt. I felt it. They're hurt, they're upset, they're lonely, they're fill in the blank. Instead of saying, I want that also to be a real relationship that happens right now today. So I bring that child, that aspect of me, into my life right now, today, in the present. And I ask them, what are you feeling today? What do you need right now? And I free them from my intellectual picture of what their past was, which allows them the opportunity to grow. And when I do that, I'm acting as their future self. You see, you can't change the physical past. We know that's a popular technique in inner child work, and it has its place in a certain continuum, if you will, of growth, where if you had bad parents, you go back and you give them new parents. It'll work for a little while, but it ultimately misses the point, because it still locks them into a past that they know isn't real. They are desirous of a real relationship with you. You, their future. And if you can hold that idea, the concept is I bring them now, right here, right now. I talk to who they are. Then I can take what I know as a spiritual adult, as a metaphysician, and I can help them learn how to reinterpret the data of their reality, which means I can't change the past, but I can change how they feel about it. I can help them to change how they think about it.
I just got a 1-minute signal,
All
but
right.
I'll let you finish the thought if you want.
We have one quick thought.
Yes.
If you could hold that idea that you are the future and you bring your child into your reality and you teach them what you know so they can change and evolve and grow, the same principle applies to your future self. Your future can bring you into their reality in exactly the same way, talk to you about what you need and want right now, and help you reinterpret the data of your reality based on what they know. And boy, is that exciting.
I love that. Thank you so much. Elanor has been sharing her wisdom. I want to thank Elanor and Steve Parrish. The show is Living Wisdom. I'm Patty Paul. Thanks for watching.